Welcome to This Explainer. When we look at the immense wealth and power of modern America, it almost feels like an inevitability, right? Like it was just destined to be a global superpower from day one. But the truth is, America's rise to the number one spot was actually highly unexpected. The historical twists, the turns, and the pure accidents to get here are absolutely wild.
So that brings us to the fundamental question we're going to answer today. How exactly did a continent that early explorers practically tripped over and then largely ignored transform into the most powerful country in human history? Well, we are going to track the crucial decisions, the unbelievably lucky real estate deals, and the conflicts that made the whole thing happen. Section 1. The Accidental Continent. Okay, let's dive right into this. To understand the United States, we actually have to rewind to the earliest days of European discovery. And this was an era where North America was really nothing more than an accidental roadblock on the way to somewhere else. Over 100 years. For more than a century after Christopher Columbus stumbled onto the Americas, the vast majority of North America was, well, it was basically ignored. Why? Because these early explorers weren't out there looking to build new societies from scratch. They were looking for a fast trade route to Asia. And more importantly, they were looking for immediate, obvious riches. And North America? It just didn't seem to have them. The motivation back then was incredibly simple. Columbus, thinking he was somewhere near India, essentially sends a message back to the Spanish crown going, "Hey, so I haven't found the spices we wanted, but the locals have lots and lots of gold." To which the King of Spain essentially replies, "Now you're talking. Go back, make them Christians, and bring back that gold." The initial exploration was entirely 100% a hunt for immediate wealth. Because of this obsession with fast wealth, the world was literally carved in two. Spain and Portugal sat down and essentially drew a line right down the map. Portugal got everything to the east, sailing around Africa to build this massive Asian trading empire. Spain took the west, but they focused heavily on Central and South America. And the reason was simple. That is exactly where the gold, the silver, and the large populations were. They actually sent one expedition up to North America in 1539, didn't find any gold, and basically decided it was just a useless wasteland. So North America was left as a completely unappealing afterthought. Section 2. Colonies to independence. Now, that initial lack of Spanish interest really left the door wide open. It took almost a century, but eventually the English started colonizing the East Coast, which set the stage for some major territorial clashes. Fast forward to 1754. The English are established on the coast, and the French have claimed the massive middle of the continent. And this brilliantly illustrates why the resulting French and Indian War played out the way it did. It came down to a massive demographic advantage. The British colonies had boomed to over 1 million people. Meanwhile, New France, they had a mere 60,000. So even with both sides teaming up with various Native American tribes, the sheer demographic weight of the British colonies meant they eventually completely dominated the French, claiming huge new swaths of territory. But here's the catch. Winning that war was incredibly expensive, and that financial hangover led directly to a spectacular fiscal standoff. Britain essentially turns to the colonies and says, "Hey, you know that incredibly expensive war we just helped you win? Yeah, it's time to start paying some taxes to fund it." But the colonists, who were feeling pretty self-sufficient at this point, shot back with, "No way, we're the ones helping you, and you won't even let us vote in Parliament?" This simple, bitter disagreement over taxes and representation was the exact domino that toppled straight into the American Revolution. From there, things move at lightning speed. 1776 brings the Declaration of Independence. By 1781, against all odds, they miraculously win the war. But then, in the 1780s, their very first attempt at an actual government is a total, absolute mess. The 13 colonies were basically functioning like 13 independent countries, united only in name, and the whole project was failing fast. Actually, it wasn't until 1789 that they ratified a brand new constitution that finally worked, electing George Washington as their first president and saving this very young nation from total collapse. Section 3. Growing Pains and Gains. Right, so now that they had a working government, it was time to grow. Moving into the 19th century, America was about to embark on what is arguably the ultimate real estate shopping spree in global history. Just to the west of the newly formed United States was the massive Louisiana Territory, controlled by France. Now, America really only wanted to buy the city of New Orleans so they could control trade on the Mississippi River. But across the ocean, Napoleon Bonaparte had very different plans. His advisor, Talleyrand, was telling him,
It is foolish to sell our largest territory, but Napoleon, he needed quick cash to fund a massive looming war with Britain. So rather than just sell New Orleans, he decided to sell the whole shebang. Now, what's really interesting here is the price tag, a mere $15 million. For that absolute bargain price, the United States accidentally doubled its size overnight. They bought an enormous, resource-rich chunk of the continent quite simply because a French emperor thousands of miles away was desperate for war funds. And honestly, it is a very good thing they got that land because of one undeniable demographic pressure: 7. In those days, the average American family had 7 children. The population of the United States was literally doubling every 20 years. That creates an immense, unstoppable pressure. All those growing families needed a place to live, which aggressively pushed waves of settlers out west, right into unclaimed and indigenous lands. This demographic boom fueled an unbelievable streak of rapid expansion. In 1819, they just buy Florida from Spain. In 1845, they annex the independent Republic of Texas. That leads to a war with Mexico, which ends in 1848 with the U.S. buying up Mexico's vast northern territories. By the 1850s, they peacefully split the Oregon Territory with Britain. Through a combination of extreme luck, cold hard cash, and conflict, the United States stretched from sea to sea in just 50 years. In fact, having reached the Pacific Ocean, they actually ran out of continent. But the national hunger for land was so intense that it led to some pretty weird legislation, like the Guano Island Act. If an American citizen found an empty island anywhere in the world that was covered in bird droppings, which, by the way, were highly prized for fertilizer and explosives, they could legally claim it as U.S. soil. Believe it or not, this bizarre workaround is a real law, and it's still active today. So, for any modern viewers out there tired of paying exorbitant rent, you might want to go find an island with some birds. Section 4, Civil War and Reunion. But it wasn't all just upward momentum. While the country was thriving geographically, severe internal fractures threatened to completely destroy everything they had just built. At the very core of this internal crisis was a stark, undeniable divide. In the North, slavery was illegal and viewed by a growing number of people as a profound moral evil. But in the South, slavery was the foundational pillar of their entire agricultural economy. After decades of bitter arguments, the inevitable escalation finally occurred when Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860. Fearing that he would abolish slavery, Southern states seceded from the Union. This triggered a devastating, bloody civil war. Ultimately, the North won, the enslaved population was rightfully freed, and the Union was painfully, slowly restored. Incredibly, though, almost immediately following the brutal devastation of the Civil War, America went right back to its real estate hustle. The Tsar of Russia wanted to offload Alaska. U.S. Secretary of State Seward offered a pretty lowball price, and the Russian envoy agreed so quickly that Seward essentially asked, "Hey, can we just sign the treaty tonight?" It was this rushed, almost comical negotiation where the Russian envoy probably realized a second too late that he absolutely should have asked for more money. Because the final price tag was a shockingly low $7 million. For that tiny amount, America scooped up the massive, resource-heavy territory of Alaska, marking yet another incredibly lucky geographic win for the expanding nation. Section 5. Stepping onto the world stage. By the end of the 19th century, America had secured its massive continental footprint. There was virtually nowhere left to expand domestically, so it was time for the nation to look outward, into the oceans. The crucial turning point here happens in 1898. Cuba was fighting a war for independence from Spain, and the American public was highly sympathetic. When an American warship mysteriously sank near Cuba, tensions completely boiled over. Spain declares war on the U.S., but the newly modernized U.S. military quickly overwhelms them, capturing Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, and even annexing Hawaii along the way. In one swift, decisive motion, America effectively ended the Spanish Empire that Columbus had started 400 years prior and scooped up a collection of global, tropical territories. Now with territories spanning the globe, the energetic new president, Theodore Roosevelt, realized the U.S. Navy desperately needed a way to move quickly between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. He wanted to build a canal straight through Panama, which at the time was owned by Colombia. Colombia initially agreed, but then changed their minds. Roosevelt's response to this stubborn real estate negotiation? He simply supported Panama in declaring independence from Colombia. And guess what? The newly independent nation of Panama happily let him build his canal. And those were the final dominoes. The Panama Canal was completed in 1914. Under Roosevelt, the U.S. had built the second largest navy in the entire world. Through a wildly unpredictable combination of strategic oceans, incredible demographic growth, dirt-cheap land purchases, and newfound naval might, America officially positioned itself as a global superpower, perfectly timed right on the very eve of World War I. Which leaves us with what is arguably the defining question of modern American history. As this accidental, ignored continent evolved into a global superpower over 423 years, a deep tension emerged. Should a powerful nation like America mind its own business and stay out of global conflicts? Or is it obligated to mind its own interests and perhaps the interests of its allies on the world stage? It is a provocative, complicated question, and it's one the entire world is still watching them navigate today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it gave you a whole new perspective on how history actually unfolds.